Today I wanted to talk about security settings. And I think a few of you are new, and so um, this may be a little, if you're not familiar with trendable types, if you're not familiar with assets or models, it may be a little difficult to follow along. Also, if you are working with a Derby or a standalone inline version, if you're not on an enterprise version, you will not be able to see the security settings because the standalone NLign versions that we send out for evaluation and for just kind of proof of concept to companies is for single computer use only. So security settings don't really make a lot of sense for a single user on a single desktop. So you will not be able to see those security settings if you have a standalone version. For security settings, if you go to the admin tab and click on security management, it'll bring up this interface where you have three different tabs. You've got users, user groups, and asset groups. And what security settings allow you to do is restrict access of your database to certain users, to certain groups of users, and also allow only certain users to do certain actions or view certain pieces of the database, certain assets with the different asset groups, certain trendable types in the user group permissions. So we'll be going over, and hopefully we'll have we'll do some examples that you can follow along with. And please, if you have any questions about your specific installation or a specific security setup that you would like to do, please bring that up so we can cover that as well for the benefit of all the group. So in the users, there's basically a list of every single individual that is allowed onto the system. So as an administrator, you're going to have to add or allow access to all the people who you want using this system. So the first time someone tries to log on to the to your NLign database and they've installed the software, if you haven't added them, they will get an error message that says something to the effect like, this individual has not yet been added as a user. Please contact your system administrator. So a lot of times what I would ask people to do is just copy that down. For the government side, it's your CAC number. For commercial, like Boeing or Northrop Grumman, it's typically your username that you use to log on to the computer. But there could be some different numbers or characters just depending on how your IT has been set up. So especially on the commercial side, I just recommend having them try and log on first and then copy and paste whatever it is that the system says is not able to log on. So that way you can add your specific name to there. So this one is me, internal eOliphant. And then as you're adding a new user, you can put in, this is the username is what you need to copy from the error message. That's basically their user logon, or on the DoD, it would be their CAC number. You can input information about their name, their first, middle, last name, their email, their phone number. The email will be important in setting up the trendable type notifications that we covered in a previous class. If you want this person to be notified that a certain trendable type was created or edited or modified, you need to make sure that this user has an email in this slot here. You can put their phone number, a job description, a different account state, active or disabled, what type of a user they are. I highly recommend as an admin that you make sure you have a backup administrator, that they are trained as well as you are, and that they also have administrator privileges, just in case you get transferred or you're on vacation. That way, if you're on vacation, they can add a new user to the system, they can change a trendable type, they can add something to help support the production. So let's go ahead and walk through that. You click on the little plus sign to add a new user. This would be their CAC number. You can either choose, this is just our test environment, and so there's all kinds of crazy data in here. You will probably have a much cleaner, much more well-defined job description set in here. But this can help in setting up your security settings. If you know that this person is an inspector or a mechanic, that can be helpful as you set up their permissions later. These other tabs, these user groups and these permissions, you'll be able to see what this person is allowed to do, but you'll not be able to change it. So this is just going to show you a snapshot, but will not allow you to actually be able to set the security settings for this person. That's done up at this level in the security management window. This is the user details, and it's the only thing that you're going to be able to add and edit are these details about the user. The actual permissions for the user, it will show you them, but just remember that you cannot in this screen change them. You've got to go back to the security management window. Make her an administrator. There we go. I'm not going to actually save her. You can delete users as well. You can create a permission report showing which permissions the selected user has in a web browser. Asset groups. So for the asset groups, they're basically a list of assets that have a similar security settings. So the way you can kind of think about asset groups is if you have maybe a set of carbon fiber parts and you want security settings for that group of assets or those parts to be set a certain way, that can be helpful. So then I can select which of the parts are carbon fiber part, or which of the assets are carbon fiber assets. I'm gonna grab some stuff here. And then I could create another group that are metallic parts or metallic assets. And then grab a different set of assets. There we go. So now I've added assets to this specific asset group. So after I've created, read this caveat, each asset must be in at least one asset group. So each asset group can have different permissions. I can have an asset group where it's the entire aircraft and I can give the NDI user group permission to see it, or I can split it out like I just did with specific parts. If I've got specific technicians that work on different parts of the aircraft that are certified for different parts of it, I can split it up as well. So user groups is kind of where the users and the asset groups combine. So if I open this reader test group, this is a list of all the users. So I can add any of the users to this group. And then the permissions is kind of a matrix where I have each asset group listed, and then each trendable type listed under each asset group. So I can kind of think about it as a matrix, or every asset group lists every trendable type. So if I have 4 asset groups and 4 trendable types, I'd have 4 times 4, 16 different lines in here, besides the initial lines. So we've got these global permissions. We can go over these. Digital cameras is a list of digital cameras that a library of digital cameras about their sensor size and their width. That can help with some of the damage mapping that we talked about in the users class. Publishing charts, publishing color presets, data sets. These are settings that say, is this user allowed to make public any of the charts, color presets, or data sets that they create? So if you have a large group of individuals, I would be careful about giving that group these permissions, because things can get messy really fast if everyone's publishing their own favorite data set or filter or their favorite color preset into your database. You may want to just keep them private so that they can use them themselves. If you do find that a user that doesn't have this permission has a data set or a color preset that the majority of your group wants to use, you might just talk to them, and then maybe one of the admin, you or one of the other admins, creates it and sets it to public so that everyone can use it. But I'd be careful with handing out permission to anyone to publish those, because when you go to select a color preset or a data set, if you have a list that's, let's say you have 30 people in your group and they all create 10 different filters, you're going to have 300 entries in there. So it can get messy fairly quickly if you're not careful with that. Usage reporting. NLign has a feature where you can see how many users have logged onto the system, how many trendables different users have created. So that's something that your general user doesn't necessarily need. And then for each individual group, there's, besides the trendable types, there's these permissions as well. Alignment assist poses are, you can set up an orientation to your asset or your model that will help the damage mapping. And you can create that orientation for the initial guess of the damage mapping. So that can help if you're always taking a picture from a similar orientation of the aircraft or of the part. That can help the damage mapping to align quicker and to align slightly better in doing its calculations. It's like an initial guess for the algorithm. Do you want the users to be able to create or read certain asset folders? We covered asset folders several classes ago, where you could set up different folders to contain your stored views, your files that you upload to the database, to contain your different models. So you can give them permissions to read, to add, to edit, or delete those asset folders. Do you want them to have access to the models in this group? So you can give them read access, add, edit, delete access. So when we set up these asset groups, let's say you only have people that are certified to work on certain models, or let's say they only have clearance to look at certain models. You can set up those security settings here, saying you can only see the assets and the models that you have clearance for. Named regions. We talked about named regions in one of the intro classes, where you can create zoning. You can create spheres that represent certain holes in the air, on the aircraft. Reference points and stored views. The stored views are orientations of the aircraft, hidden and shown, and then all the different trendable types that are created in the system. So if someone is certified to add or edit a specific inspection or trendable type, you can add those permissions here. Or if you're concerned about them being able to edit everyone's, let's say they're a fairly new inspector, you can give them permission just to edit or delete their own trendables that they create. So if they make a mistake, they can go in and fix it, but they're not going to be able to go in and delete someone else's records that someone else has been creating. Or if they've been on the shop floor a little bit longer, you trust them a little more. If it's kind of a lead stress engineer or a lead inspector, you can give them permissions to delete any of the trendables for the specific type. So you can really customize down to each specific trendable type, each specific record type, what people are able to do based off of their job function, based off of which individual model they are. It gives you a lot of power to customize what people are able to see, what people are able to do, if they're able to add, edit, or delete any of the, if they're able to even give comments on that trendable type. On certain NCheck jobs, which we'll cover in a later class, will they be able to mark them complete or reopen those jobs? Okay, so if I'm creating a new group, come into create a user group details, and then I can go and select the individuals that I want in this group. Maybe I call this group the composite technicians. And then in my permissions, I'll scroll down to my asset group that I created of carbon fiber parts. And then I'll give them read access to everything. And then if I want them to have access to the trendable types, a quick and easy way to do that is to scroll down and highlight all the trendable types that they want to give them access to, right click, and then enable selected. That way I don't have to click, some 200 times or something to give them access to all the trendable types. Or if it's just a couple of them, I can do a similar thing. I can go through here, disable or enable. So that way I can quickly and easily say, give them access to the things that I need them to have. Go ahead and save that. And then I'll do a similar thing for the metallic group. Metallic inspectors. Add the users who are able to work on the metallic groups or on the metallic parts or portions of the aircraft. And then scroll down to the metallic part section. Give them read access to the stored views. And similar thing if I want them to have access to all the trendables. I just scroll down, draw the trendables, go ahead and enable that. There we go. So now I have these two groups, these metallic inspector group and the composite technicians group that I just created. So when these individual users go in to look at those models, they'll only see the composite models, and they'll only be able to work on the composite trendable types if I've selected just those trendable types. And similar thing with the metallic inspectors. They'll only be able to view and create entries on the metallic portions. So your security settings don't take effect until they restart the application. So just keep in mind, if you've got someone on the phone and they're saying, hey, I can't access this certain trendable type for my job, I can't access this certain thing, and you add them, they're not going to be able to see it until they restart their NLign application. They don't have to restart the computer, just the software. Same thing with access to the software itself. When you very first add them as a user, they're going to have to click OK, close NLign down, and then relaunch it to be able to see any assets. One other thing, as you're going through and creating new trendable types after you've set up the security settings, it will prompt you after you've created a new trendable type. What security settings you want to have. So this is similar to the asset folder prompt. When you create a new asset, it'll ask you, do you want to copy asset folders from another asset? So it's similar with when you create a new trendable type. It's saying, choose how you'd like the security settings for this new trendable. So I can say, keep the same security settings for as a different trendable type that I've already created, or configure new permissions. Anyway, when you go to create a new trendable type, it'll basically bring you to the same interface if you say configure security settings. Or like I mentioned previously, you can copy the same security settings from an existing trendable type that you've already created. That can save you a little bit of time if you've got a group of trendable types that you're putting into the system that are new, that all have the same security settings. You can configure the first one, and then create the other handful of turnable types and just copy the same security settings as the first turnable that you entered.